Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about university enrollments. Now, the university year is coming to an end or has ended in some universities, and so they're looking for enrollments for next year. Now, the universities in Australia have an unusually large proportion of foreign students coming to study here, or study is the wrong word, coming to treat Australia like a first world degree factory where we pay money, you give degree, we now have to study. And these fees are often quite considerable. And it's just a bragging rights thing that the wealthier families, from wherever, like India and China and so on, send their children. And then because, if you're studying in Australia, you're allowed to buy real estate, then the children can double up as money laundering devices and machines through the real estate buying and selling. And if they're here for, say, a 3 or 4 or 5 year course, they can buy and sell multiple properties in that time, using the family's money. But that means, tens of millions of dollars can be effectively laundered in that way. So that's what a lot of students are here for. And I can go on about other scams to do with the, ghost colleges and things like that. But I want to focus in particular on the adverts. Now, there's a whole series of universities here pitching for the international student enrollment dollar. And so how do they go about it? Do they talk about, we provide a rigorous education? If you're a bright, hardworking student, then you're going to go places. Do they focus on that? No, not at all. Oh, goodness me. Rigorous education? You silly, silly man. What they're doing is making a brazen and blatant racist pitch. So according to these adverts, there are no white males at all in the Australian universities. In Australia, for goodness sakes, we're not talking Africa or China or, I don't know, Japan or something. No, we're talking Australia here, and there are no white students in the universities, if the adverts are to be believed. So they're pitching at some very photogenic, third world women. It's nearly all women. There are a few brown males, black males there, but it's mostly women. And they're all very photogenic. They look like fashion models, definitely not the ones that I see coming in. But they're all smiling, happy, perfect dentition, designer label clothes, and they're having a whole lot of fun. And the adverts effectively guarantee them the degree at the end, as long as they just pay the money, which is kind of how it is. Australia's just a third world degree factory, has been for some years. But why do the adverts have no white men there? Now, there are a few white women, if you look in sort of the middle distance shots in the background, but they look very lesbian. They don't look unmistakable look and vibe coming from them. But it's all about black and brown and so on, Asian people who are all, again, having a great time. Now, the next layer or the next part of it is the voiceover says, and also there's text here, that you don't need to hang out with the white people. You can hang out with your own kind. You can hang around with your own people. You can feel safe. So let's have a little look at that. This is, brazen and blatant racism being funded by the federal government and federal tax dollars. How is this allowed? How is it not screened? What if there was an advert for universities? Hey, white people, you don't hang around with those brown and black folks. You just only have to hang with other white people who share your views and values. Imagine the scream and the cry. It would be crescendo all over probably international. Well, it would be. It'd be international. Nazis with fascist swastikas. It would be, absolutely. Every news mainstream globalist controlled news outlet would be gagging over this one. But they do it the other way. Doesn't even get it. No one even considers it. No one looks at it. No one even has a mention. And so again, this blatant anti-white racism is going on, and taxpayer funded. So this is the pitch. You can come to study in Australia. You don't have to hang around with those evil, fascist, Nazi white people. Hang around with your own kind. We'll keep you all together with other Chinese or Indians or this or that, or Africans or something. And your accommodation, your recreation, your classes will all be pitched at keeping your situation racially and genetically pure, away from those evil white people. Now, why they would pitch it in that direction is sort of difficult to understand. Do they want these brown and black people to feel morally superior in some way? Those evil white troglodytes, we won't let them come anywhere near you. Those evil white people. Ooh. So why would you want to come to Australia that's white? Well, you can come to an Australia white country, but we'll make sure those fucking Nazis, those white Nazis, those straight white male Nazis, we'll keep them away from you. So it's hard to imagine. I mean, they're preaching and very solidly preaching racial segregation, and seem to be touting it. Well, seem to be they are touting it as a credential. This is something you should consider when you come to study here. We'll be racist against white people on your behalf. So it's safe to come. So I mean, that seems insane, but there you go. That's what's happening. Now, there are also various courses about leadership, and they show, the leadership is women standing at the head of a table, a brown woman standing at the head of a table, where all these soy boy white men are sitting around. She's the boss, and she's younger than them, and they're the flunkies and the stooges, and so, which actually may be closer to the truth in Australia today than we realise. But nonetheless, and then the next shot is that she's a scientist who's discovered the cure for cancer, even though she looks like she's about 22 years old, and brown, and then other things. So leadership, and then there's lots of black chicks with dreads, and they're leaders of people and so on. But at no stage, there's not a single white person depicted as a leader. Now, given that white people invented the modern world technologically, organisationally, in just about every way that you can imagine, and yet not one white person is in these leadership things. So this is a bit on the, it's beyond crazy, but this is what's happening in the advertising world. Now, the reality is, of course, that the bar is lowered to floor level, so very low bar for brown and black students or any students coming internationally. They're paying big bucks and they expect that bit of paper, and they're quite clear on saying, if you're going to flunk us, like if we're here for the first year and you're failing us in our essays or tests or whatever, we'll just go to another university who'll give us the bit of paper. So don't mark us rigorously, and don't grade us competitively. Otherwise, we're out of here. We've come here for the bit of paper, and you need to understand that. And they're quite clear about it. There's no qualms about it. That's why they come, or they all come from these very corrupt countries, where that's what happens there. They just pay for these things, bribe effectively, and they're treating the payment to the university, the payment for their tuition, they're just treating that as a bribe. That's the bribe. That's the payment for the bit of paper, and we expect it, and we're going to get it, and we'll be out of here if you don't give it to us. So the entire industry, the education industry, has been undermined and subverted because of this. So, and in addition to this, there's a whole stratum of ghost colleges that are mostly set up by Indians and Chinese and Filipinos and whatever, and they set up these ghost colleges to supposedly to give out diplomas in whatever, but really they're just labour hire, cheap peasant labour hire firms. So the people are brought in ostensibly as students, but then they're funneled back out as labour hire, cheap labour as labourers on building sites, or I don't know, working in takeout food places, all these sorts of things. And you often find that these so-called ghost colleges are interconnected with Indian firms, for example, buying up, franchises in say, take out chicken shops, things like that, kebab shops, you name it. And so, providing all that, or just cafes. The Chinese have got a system down pat where they'll go to an owner of the cafe and say, look, we'll provide all your staff at half the price you're currently paying for local Australian workers. And, the minibus or the limo just rolls up at 7 a.m. Out come the 10 Chinese people driven in there. They just do everything, and the owner just sits back and then after a period of time, the Chinese people will then offer to buy the business from the. But it's the whole thing's just money laundering and so on. There's nothing an illegal movement of people who are supposedly skilled. Now, on top of that, it's viewed by a lot of these folks from offshore that if they get an Australian degree, that effectively gives them a visa, or a citizenship, status in a first world country, which is again something, and that's only to sort of the student gets the first world visa and then brings out the whole family on the visa, these sorts of things. So it's part of a wider immigration and visa scam. Now, the extent to which, and I didn't realise this, that since the mass arrival of students, foreign students into Australia, there didn't used to be very many, in fact, hardly any. But now there's a mass movement of students and third world students, many of whom, by the way, don't speak a word of English when they arrive and still don't speak a word of English when they're finished, but somehow they get their PhD. I'd like to know how that happens. But they arrive en masse, and so the universities had to hire a lot of people to, if you like, administer these much larger numbers, these enrollments in the university. And in Australia alone, there's over 200,000 additional employees that have been employed into the universities to supposedly cope with, administrative staff and lecturers and so on, to cope with these people. But as the requirement for rigorous education has disappeared, so has the quality of the professors and lecturers and tutors that are seen in the universities. And some of them you wouldn't hire to sweep the floor, and yet there's a professor of this and associate professor of that, and so on. And so the quality of the education system generally, and the educators has gone through the floor. The bar has been lowered in every conceivable and imaginable way, and it shows. Now, there's also, at the same time as this is going on, there's a roadshow, if you will, or a new initiative that the federal government's putting together, the leftist, globalist controlled government, where it's to teach respect and social equality and these sorts of things to senior high school students, and so to teach respect. And so now, given the lack of respect that many foreign nationals, from Africa and elsewhere, the distinct and very obvious manifest lack of respect for the Western customs, the rule of law, and all these sorts of things that these mass migrants show, you'd think that the respect classes and courses and so on would be for them, or primarily at least for them. So now bear in mind that the university, when they're talking about, the education, is that it's nearly all, in fact, it was pretty much all women. There was no men at all. And 90% of the women were black and brown and Asian, with just a few white lesbians sprinkled in. But when it comes to teaching respect, showing bad people the error of their ways, the adverts, what do the adverts there show? Well, they must show black and brown people. And no. There is not a single black or brown person in those adverts. Every face in that advert that's going to be taught respect is white and male, every single one. And it goes to show the international nature of globalization is just to universally depict white people, white men in particular, as evil, bad, and swastika waving and so on, and to depict everyone else as good and virtuous and so on, when in fact it's the inverse of the reality. And the thing that irritated me about that white advert, it was the senior high school age boys, so they'd have been, I don't know, 17 or something like that, and they all looked like they'd come from. They weren't the troglodyte types that maybe could do with it. You go to some of the poorest areas of the town, single mothers, kids that are covered in tattoos by 14 and that, all this sort of stuff. They're already been in and out of prison. No, they depicted, well turned out, clean, good, clean uniforms. They're all in uniforms. They're all looking like they're well-behaved, middle-class, well-brought-up boys. It's them. They are the ones that are picked, which comes back to the reality of the globalist machine, that really the poor white people who are already poor are still poor, but the people that are really taking the hit from globalization is the otherwise mobile white middle class. They're the ones that are taking the heaviest hit from the globalization process. And so they're predetermining that these are the evil people, these are the ones that are going to be pushing back against globalization and disagreeing with it or questioning it. They're the ones. So they're the ones that have to have re-education on respect, which is code word for accept your fate, you fucking Nazi. And that's it. So when it comes to respect, only straight white middle class males need that education. No one else does. I mean, for goodness sakes. You've been a Tacitus today. Do you push back channel? Thank you for listening.